You know, every single one of us has a story that starts way, way before we're born. It's this incredible story of development, of tiny signals, and of this one moment where we all diverge from the exact same starting point. So today, we're going to dive into that story, how our reproductive systems develop. Okay, let's get into it. So let's just start with the biggest question right off the bat. When we talk about developing male or female anatomy, where does that story actually begin? I mean, do we start with a male blueprint and a female blueprint right from day one?
Well, the answer is pretty mind-blowing. It turns out, for every single one of us, no matter the outcome, the journey begins in the exact same place. We all start with the exact same set of initial structures. For the first few weeks, you literally can't tell the difference.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at that common blueprint. Then, the first genetic switch that changes everything. We'll follow the two different paths for all the internal plumbing and the external parts, and then we'll wrap up with the final journey everything takes to get into place. Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the common blueprint. Scientists call this the indifferent stage, and it's basically the period where it's absolutely impossible to tell whether a developing gonad is going to be male or female. So how does this indifferent gonad even form? Well, it all kicks off around week 4. You've got these primitive germ cells. These are the very first cells that will eventually become sperm or eggs, and they start this long journey from a structure called the yolk sac. By week 6, they finally arrive at their destination, these two ridges in the body called the genital ridges. And boom, that combination creates the indifferent gonad. And this is the key takeaway here. This structure is identical in every single embryo. It's like a blank slate, a piece of hardware that's just sitting there, waiting for a specific software update, waiting for instructions to tell it what to do next. So what are those instructions? That's the first big switch. And that brings us to section 2, the first switch. This is that fork in the road, the moment of divergence, and it's all thanks to one tiny little piece of genetic code that basically walks onto the stage and takes over the show. And that piece of code is the SRY gene. It stands for sex-determining region Y. And yeah, as you probably guessed, it's found on the Y chromosome. Just think of it as the master switch. If that gene is there and it gets flipped on, it sends out one single powerful command to that indifferent gonad. You are going to become a testis. Now here's where you can really see those two paths split. If the SRY gene is present, those early structures, the primitive sex cords, they organize themselves into testes cords. But if there's no SRY gene, a totally different program runs. Those same primitive cords just degenerate. They go away. And a new set of structures, the cortical cords, forms instead, setting the stage for an ovary.
And if we zoom in even closer on a cellular level, in an XY embryo, you get these specialized cells. Sertoli cells, which provide support, and Leydig cells. And these Leydig cells are a huge deal because by week 8, they start pumping out testosterone. This hormone is going to drive pretty much the rest of male development. Meanwhile, in an XX embryo, those cortical cords we just mentioned break up into little clusters, and each one wraps around a germ cell to form what we call primordial follicles. Basically, the future eggs. Okay, so the gonads are now on one path or the other, but what about all the internal tubing and connections? Well, that brings us to section 3, internal ducts. And you'll see a pattern here. We start with 2 sets of blueprints, but only one is going to get built. That's right. It's pretty wild to think about, but every single embryo, male or female, starts out with 2 complete parallel sets of plumbing. You've got the Mesonephric ducts, which are also called the Wolffian ducts, and the Paramesonephric ducts, also known as the Müllerian Ducts. Both are there, ready to go. The choice between which set of pipes gets used is all down to the hormones coming from those new testes. So testosterone tells the Wolffian ducts, hey, it's your time to shine, and they develop into the structures that carry sperm. At the exact same time, another hormone called anti-Müllerian hormone, or AMH, tells the Müllerian ducts, nope, not you, and causes them to degenerate. In the female, there's no testosterone, so the Wolffian ducts just fade away. And there's no AMH, so the Müllerian ducts are totally free to develop. Now, in female development, the 2 Müllerian ducts have to come together and fuse perfectly in the middle to create the uterus. It's a really precise process. So it kind of begs the question, what happens if that fusion isn't quite perfect? And this is where we see a real-world example of what can happen. If that fusion is incomplete,
It can lead to something called a bicornuate uterus, which is basically a heart-shaped uterus with two horns. A lot of the time, there are no symptoms at all, but it just goes to show you how absolutely crucial that one little fusion step is. All right, we've covered the gonads and the internal ducts. Let's move on to our fourth section and see how all the external parts take shape. And yep, you guessed it, they all start from one common set of structures. Just like with everything else, there's an indifferent stage here too. All external genitalia, whether they become male or female, start out as three simple little bumps. You've got the genital tubercle up top, the urethral folds in the middle, and the genital swellings off to the sides. So in the male pathway, androgens are running the show, specifically a really potent form of testosterone called DHT. First, the genital tubercle grows and stretches out to become the phallus. Then, the urethral folds get pulled forward and zip up together to form the tube of the urethra. And finally, the genital swellings move down and fuse to form the scrotum. And that zipping up of the urethral folds is another one of those supercritical steps. If it doesn't happen completely, it can result in a condition called hypospadias, where the opening of the urethra is on the underside of the penis instead of at the tip. It's a direct result of that one developmental step getting interrupted. So what happens in the female pathway without that strong androgen signal? Well, those same three structures just take a different route. The genital tubercle only grows a little bit to become the clitoris. The urethral folds don't fuse at all, and they become the labia minora. And the genital swellings also stay separate, forming the labia majora. We are almost at the end of our story. The last major event is a journey. You see, both the testes and the ovaries start their development way up high in the abdomen, near the kidneys. They actually have to travel to get to their final destinations. And for the testes, it is quite a trek. They're guided by this ligament-like cord called the gubernaculum. It basically pulls them down from way up in the abdomen through a passage in the abdominal wall called the inguinal canal around week 28, and they finally arrive in the scrotum by about week 33. Now, the ovaries, they descend too, but their journey is much, much shorter. They just move down a little bit and stop inside the pelvis. Their gubernaculum doesn't pull them any further. Instead, it attaches to the uterus and becomes a couple of important ligaments in the adult body. So, when you look at the whole picture, from an identical blueprint to one gene flipping a switch to a cascade of hormones that just picks one of two pre-existing pathways, it's just an amazing story of divergence from a totally shared origin. And it kind of leaves you with this one big thought. If our very biology begins on a shared path, what does that really tell us about the nature of difference itself?